However, it's sincere labor. Eventually, people would pay, and the Armada would arrive on Earth. Primak's grill snorted. Earth was within an hour's reach, and they used it as a synonym for dirt. How could such a useless species have created so much trouble for primitive lunkers? Primak's Grazin scowled at Grill through the view. "You're making a mistake, Grill." The Flaxian screen Grazin was a short biped with long fur and 3 eyes. Grazin was so old that his fur had turned silver, and he was despised by the orange Flaxians. Grazin Grill detested the other Primoxes, but he particularly disliked the elderly. Grazin had a habit of staring down his muzzle at everyone, which annoyed Grill. The fact that Grand Primox growled and Grill Aura was a Gru, a nobleman of House Gru, made it worse. He was a 2-armed biped, but the house smiled as if he had 2 eyes. He stood 3 meters tall and wore blue armored plates all over his body. The kit had been improved using nanotechnology and ceramic coatings, making it nearly indestructible. Grill could lift 3 tons and was unstoppable. He was impervious to small arms fire, and even his eyes were shielded, making it unlikely that he'd engage in combat anytime soon. This concluded today's task for Grill's pores, because humans had caused enough trouble. The fleet would be maintained by 12 ancient G battlecruisers, each 2 kilometers and 0.5 kilometer long. Large, blunt, lead-coated cylinders protruded from their apertures. Like heavy weapons, like pulsars, they were repulsive and unforgiving, much like Grill. He claimed that the densest, toughest material ever created was Einum armor. A ship would be virtually indestructible in combat if it had even a millimeter of it. Cruisers featured 2 meters of insulating lead and armor more than half a meter thick. Both the inside and outside of the hull were covered in volume, ensuring plutonium was safe in its very radioactive environment. "Well, you're correct, Gren," Grazin said, his expression growing more intense. "You're making multiple mistakes at once. Even though I always knew you were an idiot, Grill, I didn't believe you were this much of one." Old friends Grazin and Grill were not fools, and Grill growled, "Watch your tongue." Among Grill's people, friends professing to be friends with an adversary was a serious insult. Grazin knew that Grill disliked him. As he frowned, Grazin said, "The humans have joined forces with the thing they're giving the... We must stop allowing these jerks to use thrower weapons before we... You're scared about a few thousand bugs hiding but another insect hunt?" Gren snorted. "No, Kay, there's no reason to lie." He added, "The other Primox agree with me." But I told him it wasn't. 5 other Primox and True Grazin had protested, but they were the only ones who didn't protest enough to thwart the strategy because humans posed a threat. Grazin nodded solemnly. "Yes, I guess the Primox are much more harmful than we initially thought." His expression changed to one of sly amusement. "Yet you, old friend, would know everything. Please let me know if your house is still attempting to kill the lead dealer." Grill Or was the House Azure's chief dealer when the jerk killed Grazin's nephew, the most notable heir. Like a beetle grew, the human had shot him down. House Azure had placed a bounty on the spiteful individuals who were their nobility. Instead of hiding and dying, Prim's head dispatched assassins and strike teams. The lead dealer had slain every death dealer since his time, as he was meant to. How the lead dealer contributed to Grazin's problems and why Azure was unable to kill him. "Azure used to be the source of the Lunkers' shame and mockery," said Grill, "but now they're viewed as a laughing stock." Gren Grill reprimanded, "We both know you only want to stop me to change the subject." This is just part of the revised text. Ensuring punctuation is added to clarify the flow of conversation and enhance readability for voiceover. If you would like me to continue with the rest of the text, let me know. It was strafing away at an angle, 7,000 kilometers from the fleet, in an attempt to keep your distance from Circle Grill ships, since shrapnel and debris were flying everywhere. Directions were made from the location of 2 battle cruisers that were once visible. Short pause. He couldn't have imagined a weapon that could pierce invulnerable armor in a single shot. How much force is required to completely destroy an Olden battlecruiser? The warships were still in pain and were frantically chasing red and green light lances, pulses from their powerful disruptor weapons and molecular decentration beams. White antimatter spheres erupted from the O cannons in a rapid volley, but it was ineffective at 7,000 kilometers. The glorious purpose had plenty of time to relax and dodge. The plasmac casters might perform better, as none of it would come into contact with the human ship. The flaming spheres of ionized gas moved, nearly as slowly as disruptor cannons. Even though they were as slow as the antimatter, they were still able to capture the glorious purpose, and more significantly, the warships projected an ionic field that held the guided plasma together. The blazing bullets would be guided by that ionic field wherever they needed to go, beyond the human ship's capacity. Grill opened a channel to the remaining warships and increased their power in order to avoid them. "Those lunkers are too far away for the plasmac casters," he ordered. "Cut off electricity to the other weapons and reroute it to the engines if you can. 9 of the 10 battlecruisers that are left must close in." They recognized his orders, but the last one did not respond. Primox Grill yelled at them, but he realized it would be pointless, and instead observed the glorious purpose move with the humans as balls of burning plasma closed in on them. The plasma spheres would easily outmaneuver the incoming fire, which surprised Grill for such a basic ship. It would provide greater difficulty, but it would take them another minute to get to the humans. Grill saw a significant accumulation of large amounts of energy circulating through the back of the opposing ship. He cleansed all the debris off the massive gun that ran the length of the ship. The glorious purpose released energy all at once in a huge electromagnetic flare. The ship bucked and flung backwards from the projectile's recoil. It was so swift that it hardly received a scan. The damn thing had been launched at 62 kilometers per hour. He yelled at the warship to dodge as it was speeding toward inexorable doom. Now that the unstoppable fate was attempting to move, Dodge was moving too slowly. Even without the molem, the vessel was simply too large to overcome its inertia during the round. The projectile punched through the armor and out the other side of the battlecruiser. 2 seconds after the lower grill, the unstoppable fate shattered into pieces. Breathing heavily, he displayed the human projectile scan. It was an easy task. A bullet made of 1 ton of carbonated steel was topped with a big diamond with a huge canister grin in the middle of the projectile. He realized that each of the canisters was an antimatter containment module. The canister would be loaded with a module identical to that of his warships. Grill's compacted antimatter gods below could now observe what had transpired. When the projectile pierced the volume, the canister broke, releasing 2 tons of compressed antimatter into the battle cruiser, where it had mingled with the ship's elements and environment. When antimatter destroyed one another, enough energy was released to demolish the damned ship. What kind of idiot would try to launch an entire canister of antimatter at such high rates? He mumbled. How had those prehistoric people accomplished this without... Grill shook his head, but it didn't matter because the humans now had a weapon that could blow them to the lowest dimension. It was difficult to destroy an Oldan battleship in a single shot. Absurd. But there it was. Gren had been correct. She ought to have sent every ship the Fed could muster to keep avoiding and strafing. How long before it started charging its electromagnetic? Slug thrower once more. It could shoot for 10 seconds, 30. The fight had begun, and it couldn't have lasted more than a minute. 3 of Grill's ancient GANs were clouds of expanding molten lava 3 minutes ago. After a minute, they decided to fire again. After 20 seconds of charge, the first plasma sphere, the glorious purple one, arrived at the human cannon. The humans attempted to avoid it, but the plasma altered its path to follow them, benefiting the humans. The plasma may be able to deal some damage, but their small cruiser was unable to withstand it. A single strike would destroy all of the plasma. As the sphere began to detonate, Grill leaned forward eagerly to inspect the debris of his adversary. It was too soon. 10 seconds should still be the closest worry. What the humans saw, Grill zoomed the sensors in on that other sphere that detonated. Grill said that the human beings were firing missiles at the plasmas. They had no trouble interfering with the Fed cruisers, but the primitive explosives would have been ineffective against them. The plasma spheres were exploding, sending ionized gas everywhere because of the ionic forces holding them together. A portion of the glorious purpose left the plasma's route. The human ship would be safe if it splashed against the ship, but not enough to penetrate its tungsten armor. How many rockets did it take for Grill's fist to smash through the top of his platinum desk, he thought. He doubted that those lunkers would run out of ammunition before they could kill the rest of his fleet. 9 ships remain, 9 minutes away. The only thing he could do was destroy that spacecraft after the glorious purpose had died. He would prevail if the battlecruiser lasted, but the human spacecraft was too swift. The Primox was the answer, since his battleships were never able to land a hit in time. Suddenly, he was back on the communications for every ship he had requested. Launch all of your fighters. The human ship is not armored. It took his fleet a minute to destroy them, but your fighters can bomb them out of the sky. By the time they complied, the unyielding rage had grown into a cloud. Primox Grail had to join another ship because of the debris, and he decided to join the overpowering force after he received a nice. He grinned as he examined the sensor feeds, seeing that each battlecruiser had 20 smaller fighter craft on board. The ships there ranged in length from 40 to 100 meters, so smaller was a relative term. Now, 1,980 fighter aircraft were rushing in the direction of the glorious purpose. Fighters outran the human ship by a great margin, and their cannons weren't as powerful. They would be more than sufficient for a flying gun that is hardly armored, although they are not as strong as those used by Grill's battle cruisers. When the humans realized they were about to die, they responded with